Hello friends, I'm very excited to get to share with you through this video today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the ways that we share messages with one another in our monthly meeting and our other business process at First Friends. But before I turn to that, I'm going to start with a story from a friend of mine who's not a Quaker at all. He's one of my friends through community theater by the name of Smev Ferris. He wrote this online a little ways back and it stuck with me. Years back, long before I was considering starting a business, I noticed that a public bathroom in a building that I often entered was always out of soap. This was an annoying inconvenience to me. As I left one day, I muttered to myself, someone should really stock this bathroom. I took 3 more steps before I realized, I'm someone. The next time I visited, I had a bottle of soap with me. As usual, there was no soap inside, so I left the bottle on the sink. I didn't do this often, and more bottles of soap began to appear over time, which taught me a valuable lesson. I am someone, and instead of blaming others, which is especially easy when you don't know who the others are, I could take direct action to fix the problem or fill the gap. That's the end of Smev's little story that he had written. And that's something that I read that online several years back, and it resonated with something that I already sort of was trying to practice in my life, and it put some language to it. But apart from what we may do in our day-to-day lives out and about in the world, it really puts a good point on our responsibility to share with one another when we're doing business at First Friends. I mean, how often have we had this thought or this feeling, someone should do something, somebody should do something about this? Or maybe we're sitting in a meeting and we say, somebody should really speak up and say something. Each of us, each of you is the someone. This is true throughout our lives, but it's especially true, nowhere more true perhaps, than in our Quaker meetings. We have to change our focus from this thought of someone should and really accept our own personhood, our own autonomy to act, our own responsibility to share with one another. We have to take responsibility for and act on our own discernment and our own views. If you find yourself thinking someone should, but then you don't speak up, and nobody does that thing or nobody says that thing in meeting, you might begin feeling hurt or feeling resentment around something that no one else even knows about because we have no access to know your thoughts or your feelings. In fact, you might wind up going around feeling mad at whoever that someone was who didn't do the thing because they did the same inaction that you yourself were doing. The fact is, nobody else in meeting knows your heart. Nobody else knows what's on your mind. Nobody else knows what message may have been shared with you through spirit as a leading or as discernment to share with the rest of us. As a result of that, nobody else can be responsible for speaking on your behalf. First of all, this is not fair to you. Not fair to you to expect somebody else to speak on your behalf because that nullifies your voice. It nullifies your role, your place in the community. It's also not fair to you because they can't fully know and speak your concern. They can hear what you share with them and have their own understanding or interpretation, but only you know the true depth of your own heart and your own discernment. Not only is it not fair to you, but it's also not fair to that person if you go to them and say, well, I didn't feel comfortable talking in meeting, but I want to share it with you and maybe you can do something about it. Because as they make that turn, if they take on that responsibility to speak out something that you didn't share, effectively it's replacing their own voice, their own opportunities to share with your voice and sharing on your own behalf. Not only that, but it may place spiritual, emotional burdens on them to be advocating on your behalf, which is not their load to carry. So I touched on it's not fair to you, it's not fair to them, but I also want you to think about it's not fair to us as a community, as a collective body working together. If you don't speak up and share on your own behalf, we lose the opportunity to hear you, to know you, to understand you more fully and more deeply. And that hurts us all as a group, as a body, as a community. Not only do we lose the opportunity to hear it directly from you, but your concern, if you said it, might spark something, might resonate with something else that's on someone else's heart, and really give them more full opportunities to speak their own leadings. And perhaps most importantly, it's not fair to the community because it makes deeper, more meaningful dialogue impossible. Our gifts of discernment are interdependent on one another. No one person or subset of the group carries the load. We all do the work together so that one person shares something, and that might kick off an idea for somebody else, and that might trigger something that comes from somebody else's own different but equally valuable spiritual gifts. If we don't hear from you, we can't engage in the kind of back and forth sharing to reach deeper truths. We can't ask clarifying questions that you may raise, and we can't exercise the full depth of discernment in community with all voices sharing. So it's really important that you be able, willing, ready, excited to speak the leadings that you are led to. For fairness for you, fairness to each individual member of the community, and fairness and benefit of the whole community collectively as we work together. So I talk about discernment. I want to talk about, sometimes we get in that position, and I know it, I've been there, where you have a leading, you have a thought, or you have an idea, but you're like, is this something that needs to be shared? Is it not? There is work. It's not simply as quick as something jumps into your mind and you jump up to speak it. We all know those things. And this really is one message that when I bring this to you, it's like I'm speaking to you, but I'm speaking to myself too. One of the messages that I really need to focus on and learn to be better about is the message of sometimes I got to stop thinking and start praying. Stop trying to take on the load of figuring it out myself. Release that, let that go, turn that over to God, turn that over to Spirit to give me guidance and direction in leading. The other is we have to learn to release our own notion of ego and investment in our ideas or in outcomes. It's important that we remember that the outcome of any given decision at First Friends is not all about any one of us. A few years back, Ministry and Council studied a book together called Real Good Church by Molly Finney Baskett. And one of the big takeaways that just hit me right upside the head and then that's really stuck with me is what she calls the 75% rule. So this is a quotation from that book. We, at her church, we have spent more time than I care to remember mediating conversation between people who disagreed about proper behavior in worship. Interestingly, in our church, the old and young folk don't really fight about worship. The arguments have often broken down along lines of newbie and veteran, or parents versus non-parents. We do the best we can to balance people's sometimes very varying worship needs, always mindful of the 75% rule coined by Reverend James Forbes of Riverside Church, that in a truly vital church, you're only happy with what's going on about 75% of the time because you're giving up the other 25% for someone down the pew who is different from you, who really needs the very same thing that you eschew. So we have to take time to think about something that comes to our mind, that comes to us in a discussion. Is this something that's my own personal thoughts, my own personal preference, or is this something deeper? Is this something that's a leading from Spirit? Is this something that provides insight that may benefit the spiritual condition of the entire community? How would it affect the community overall if I released my concern? Is this something that's particular to me and that by releasing it I may benefit the entire group? Janice Wood gave a beautiful example of this in a meeting that I attended recently. She's given me permission to share with you. We were talking about seating in our meeting space. And she shared in the discussion about the depth of emotional attachment she has to our meeting room and the way that it's currently laid out. Her own wedding, funerals for people that she loved, so many events tied deeply into her heart that she's attended in that space and that she remembers when she sees that meeting room as it has existed for so long. And after saying that, she also said, but I recognize that this discussion is not about what I personally, individually need. It's about what's good for the spiritual condition of the whole meeting, both right now and for many, many years and generations into the future. So my own personal preference isn't really what's important to this conversation. It's so important for all of us to be able to make those kinds of realizations and recognitions. And I really wanted to share that example. I'm grateful that she gave me the permission to share that example with you, because I thought it was really, really heartfelt and beautiful example of how we can all be thinking through these kinds of things. Not only is it important to take time to do the prayer and open to Spirit, to really do the discernment about whether this is a message to share or not, it's also important, if you don't feel like you've reached the clearness yet on that, if you need more time for that discernment, always feel free to ask for it. And there's two different ways that can come about, at least, probably more, but two that jump to my mind right offhand. One is that you might say, I need time. I don't feel clearness in my heart, in my discernment about this. I'm not ready to speak to it or for us to move forward. Speaking on your own behalf as an individual. But there's also a gift of the Spirit to discern the movement of the energies and the sharing that's in the room. That is not solely the responsibility on the clerk. And if you have that gift, if you have that leading that this group needs more time, more work, somehow we feel unresolved, there's also space for you to share that leading as well. On behalf of the group, I feel like we're just not done with this conversation. There may be more that needs to be discerned, more that needs to be said. Finally, friends, I want to emphasize that if, for whatever reason, you don't feel comfortable to share in a particular meeting or particular business item that comes up, I want to ask that you not go around later to someone else to undermine the action of that meeting. Now, there's two different discussions that are important here. One is the discussion of, I didn't feel safe sharing, and how can we have better process so that everybody feels safe? That is 100% appropriate and really necessary. So I invite you as the clerk for meeting to come see me if there's anything that I can do better to create open, freer spaces for sharing. You're also welcome always to share with ministry and counsel or others who care for the spirit of our meeting. Those procedural questions are important. What I'm trying to discourage you from is anything that takes on a particular business item to revisit or raise doubts about a decision or an action that was already completed in meeting where either you weren't present or were present but didn't speak up. Like I said earlier, if you go around to someone else to speak to them later about that, it creates real problems. You should not expect someone else to share those concerns on your behalf or to speak up on your behalf. Again, not fair to them, not fair to you, not fair to the community, as I discussed earlier. Our handbook of procedures also recognizes the problematic nature of those kinds of secondhand conversations. There's a section that's labeled as Notes on Quaker Etiquette for Everybody. It has 8 points. And number 7 is this: to keep silent in the meeting and then become very vocal outside is not keeping with Quaker process. And then number 8, above all, do not stay away from monthly meeting and then criticize the action taken. Now, if you're there but don't speak up in monthly meeting, it's effectively the same as if you had stayed away and then go behind to criticize the action taken. It makes it impossible for us to have our conversations with one another in good faith and to really seek the discernment that we need collectively. It undermines the ongoing work that others may take that decision from monthly meeting and be carrying it out, only to be hearing that there's some question or concern, and then they don't know how to proceed. It undermines the spirit of community and group discernment that we all share together. But the important thing, more than anything else from this whole message, is to re-emphasize, you are someone. You are important to all of us at First Friends. Your voice is important. Your spiritual gifts are important. Your leadings are important. I'm always open for you reaching out to me in any ways that I can help to empower and support you in sharing those things, and I look forward to hearing your voice in our future meetings together. Thank you, friends.